Hello and welcome to the Commission Files. I'm Will Leach. This podcast is made at Commission Christian Radio in Dundonald outside Belfast because we like doing this kind of thing. Now, I always find it fascinating when we meet people on the Commission Files who are Christian leaders, people who've stepped up to take responsibility for things out there in society, making a difference, looking after teams and businesses and organisations. My guest this time does all those things and more, not least a challenging role these days in running Boys Brigade Northern Ireland. Lisa Keys is the Chief Officer there. Lisa, you're a very busy person, so thanks for taking the time to settle into Studio 2 and tell us about what you're thinking about when you do what you do. Welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
What is the Boys Brigade these days?
Boys Brigade. Well, I suppose Boys Brigade these days is just another iteration of what it was when it started all those years ago. And it's an organisation for boys. It's rooted in Christian faith. And through Boys Brigade, we engage with boys and young men, offering them opportunities to grow, offering them opportunities to take on challenges, to discover new things, to learn, to take part in so many different things, but ultimately to hear about Jesus. And Boys Brigade is very much about advancing Christ's kingdom among boys.
So how big are you? How many members? How many boys connected? How many leaders?
Yeah, so in Northern Ireland Boys Brigade, or we call it BBNI, we have 243 companies which are based in Northern Ireland and 3 of those in Donegal, and they're all linked to churches, so it's part of the ministry of the church. We have an incredible 2,700 volunteer leaders, somewhere in and around that, which is absolutely amazing, and they're the people who do the work every week. And we have just over 11,300 boys and young men. So those are boys and young men aged P1 right up to year 14. And that is just incredible, particularly in a world now where there's so many other things that boys can do. Football, rugby, crafts, all kinds of things, you know. And we have over 11,000 coming week after week to Boys Brigade.
You listed quite a lot of things there, and that's the issue, isn't it? Finding a programme, finding activities. So what's that? What are those activities and those programmes based on?
So we offer a balanced programme. So within Boys Brigade, first and foremost, it's about the Bible. So we produce scripture programmes that leaders can lift and use and adopt for their boys and do it in different ways. We would have a number of ministers who would get involved in teaching the scripture within the Boys Brigade. But we also do lots of other programmes as well, because whilst the Bible is central to what we do, it's not Sunday school. It's not the one thing, the only one thing. And so boys get the opportunity to do lots of different activities, arts and crafts, sports, music, Duke of Edinburgh's Award, President's Badge, King's Badge. The challenge for us as BBNI is to offer a balanced programme. So we in BB, the staff team, our role is to equip leaders. So we're looking at how do we train leaders, how do we provide them with resources, how do we provide them with programmes and run competitions and have things that the boys can participate in. And volunteering is so hard. You know, everyone has so many additional challenges on their time now. People are balancing family, they're balancing work, they're balancing just the busyness of life. And so we try to provide a framework, and the leaders can then pick and choose from that framework what suits them, what suits the boys. And that gives the variety with BB. No two BB companies are exactly the same, but fundamentally they are teaching the Bible to the boys and young men that come, and that's what makes it part of BB.
So it's so much more than the traditional outsider's view, which might have been, those are the boys in the uniforms who like marching.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And there are some companies love marching. There are other companies don't do it at all because it doesn't suit the boys that come along. So it's very much about making it suit the boys that come through your doors and the leaders that you have. And leaders do lots of different things. You know, we've some leaders teach them how to gut fish. We have others who, lovely story where when the leader was in BB, they made a shoe shine box. And so they got this template made. So all their boys put together these wooden boxes with all the different elements to shine their shoes. And it just, when you hear stories of what goes on in the different companies, it's just mind-blowing, the creativity of the leaders and their enthusiasm and commitment and their desire to want to do different things. So it's so different from school. It's about each boy finding something that they can do that really sparks something in them, makes them feel valued.
A 50-year-old memory of family chores, and Friday night was shine everybody in the family's shoes night. And I don't know how much it was about shiny shoes and about just making me learn discipline. Half a thing that my mum and dad felt I knew I had to do, and would be down me if I didn't do it, and so on. And then, of course, it was obviously shining shoes for inspection at Scouts, because I was a Scout person. But, so have you been in your time?
Well, yes, I've been in lots of other organisations.
Let's try and understand something, because people might be remembering, and it was a big, big time in your life. In September 2023, you finalised what we might call a redefinition of your relationship with the BB in UK and Ireland. Sure. Gwyneth Paltrow might have called it a conscious uncoupling. Explain what it was that happened.
Yeah, so I joined BB 4.5 years ago, January 2021. And whenever I started, I was told that several times over the years, BB in Northern Ireland had looked at what it would look like to be independent to BB in the UK. Still part of the big BB family, but just totally independent and self-governing. And so that had been discussed many, many times over the years. And then whenever I started with the organisation, we looked again at it, and we were coming out of COVID. It was a different time. Organisations had to look differently to try and future-proof. And there was a feeling that becoming independent in Northern Ireland would be a better opportunity for the companies in Northern Ireland and give us the opportunity to grow and develop in line with our partnerships with the churches, in line with what mattered for people in Northern Ireland, and making it work for the leaders. We were 1/3 of the overall membership of BB in the UK. And
really?
Yeah, 1/3 came from Northern Ireland, and all our fees went to BB in the UK, but we weren't part of their management team. We weren't part of their, we weren't employed by them. And so that created difficulties in terms of having a voice and feeding into things. And Northern Ireland is different. We build everything on our relationships. We, talk to a leader and they need a bit of help. So you jump in the car and you go down and visit them and you have a coffee with them. It's not the same in the UK because they're covering the geographies of Scotland right down to the bottom end of England. And so we looked at, is there a different way? Is there a better way? In Northern Ireland, we have fabulous premises at Newport. We had no debt on those premises. We have a smaller staff payroll because we're a smaller organisation, and yet our fees were contributing to this larger organisation. They were being dictated to by that organisation, going up year on year. And we didn't feel that we had a purposeful sense of input into things that we were doing. And we're a faith organisation as well. And we just felt that maybe faith was not being as central as it should be. It was not coming as centrally from the initiatives that were coming out of BB UK that we were part of, that we were paying to be part of. And so after long discussions and lots of meetings and lots of consultation, we embarked on an exit from BB UK. Now, we have a fabulous relationship with them. We have a very, very healthy relationship with BB UK. We have a commercial agreement with them to be BB in Northern Ireland, to use the name Boys Brigade, to use the logos and the trademarks and things. But we are totally self-governing now, which means we have the flexibility to be able to change direction very quickly on things. If we're doing something and it's not quite working, we can go back and look at it and go, okay, we can change that because we're governed locally. And that gives a little bit more of a sense of what's relevant for Northern Ireland, what's right for our companies. And when I started, we really looked at how do we engage with all the leaders. I mean, I came in the middle of COVID. And it was very difficult. If we remember back, there was, difficulties. I couldn't even sit with the team and have a cup of coffee and ask them, what church do you go to? What do you call your kids? Or how are you doing? And so we started phoning every single BB company, phoning the captains and going, how are you? What's happening? Are you doing any activities? Are you trying to do online? Are you doing doorstep deliveries to your boys? How can we help support you? And we started to move it from being very transactional to being very relational. And that means that we knew then that some of the things that were coming from BBUK just weren't relevant in Northern Ireland. The education system's different. Some of the
the laws are different.
Yeah, some of the programmes they were giving to us that our companies were paying to be part of, they weren't relevant. They didn't actually make sense for Northern Ireland. It was about an education system that talked about different qualifications that we don't do here. And like that's just a very small, minor example. So, yeah, we did an intense year and a half of negotiations and consultation.
Were they shocked when you said we're thinking of going parallel to you but not necessarily day to day with you?
No, because they'd heard it before. I mean, it had been...
Were they shocked you did it this time?
Yes. I believe so. And I believe there were people who never thought we would do it. It nearly happened in 2017, before my time. And then on balance, they decided that it wasn't quite the right time and we would just try and see whether it could work. And then it just became apparent that actually there maybe was a better way for us and, for them as well. They no longer were listening to us going, but we would like to be part of this. We would like to be part of this discussion. We would like to feed into this. This doesn't suit what we're doing here. So, yes, I think... I don't think they were surprised because it had been, mooted before. It had been discussed before. That it had gone quite far in discussions before that. But I think probably some people were surprised we actually went through with it.
And looking at it from this end, from the Northern Ireland end, when you consulted and talked to people and said, look, we're really seriously considering this time, you're going to get people who are surprised and taken aback, and you're going to hear a huge variety of views. So
absolutely.
I think you have to manage correctly.
It wasn't easy. You'll know David Blevins was our president and our chair at the time, and David was very much, we have to talk to people. We have to listen. We have to take on board what people are saying and see how we can adopt that in our approach. And we did. David and I moved the length and breadth of the country, talking to people, having meetings, listening. I think the challenge, Will, is that sometimes whenever people ask you to listen, they're asking you to take on board their opinion above everything else. And when you listen, you have to discern how that fits with the other voices that you're listening to. And I did a lot of listening. I didn't shy away from any of the difficult conversations, and there were many. There were difficult meetings. People love BB, and that's fabulous. But sometimes that brings out a passion that can sometimes bring out things in a way that maybe on reflection wasn't the best way to articulate what you were thinking about. And so, we all needed a bit of grace in those situations. And, I look back at some of the conversations and, probably the way I reacted wasn't the best way in that particular situation. But you're in the middle of a very intense period of negotiations. You're seeking God's will in what you want to happen, or not what you want to happen, what He wants to happen. And you're asking, is this right, God? Close these doors if these doors are not the right doors for us to step into. And that's really difficult too, because as a staff member leading a charity, managing the day-to-day on top of very intense negotiations, you're trying to balance everything. And you're trying to listen to the people around you. And thankfully, there were really good people in that whole process. David was exceptional, as he always is, but just so rooted on this needs to be God's will taking us forward. And so many times throughout the whole negotiations, Joshua 1 verse 9 just kept coming back to him or being shared with him by people, or you would open your Bible one day and that would be the reading, and it was just about, be strong and courageous, but I, the Lord, will go with you. And we renovated a room in Newport, our centre, and we put that on the wall because that really was what we sensed the whole way through. God was leading and guiding. And God has been very faithful in that and has blessed us in the 2 years since that. And as I say, we've a great relationship with BBUK now. I couldn't have said that a few years ago because we each wanted the best for our organisation. Yes. And of course, we're going to do our jobs. But we've a great relationship now, and we have great opportunities as BBNI. And not everybody's still on, there's a few people still not really on that journey with us, but we've had such great response and feedback. We launched a new vision last year, and that vision is to raise generations of Christ-like men, and that sits alongside our object of advancing Christ's kingdom. And the response we've had from that has been phenomenal.
There were two issues you've mentioned, funding and faith.
Yeah.
Funding, people kind of understand that. They understand the business world, and you have to make... Faith is a very emotive one.
Yes.
Not least whenever you say, look, we're just seeing this slightly differently.
Yeah.
That's where people take offence.
Absolutely.
Why do you think you're right and we're wrong? Why are you being holier than us?
Yeah.
Because that's happened with other organisations.
Yeah.
It happened with Girl Guides UK over the Promise.
Yeah.
Again, how do you manage that graciously?
That's so difficult because perceptions, people misunderstand what you say and what you mean. And we had people saying, well, I know loads of BB companies in Scotland and they're absolutely rooted in the Bible. We never, ever said that BB wasn't. What we were saying was, in our experience of the conversations we were having at a management level, there were some things we weren't just seeing, the faith being front and centre. Yes, it was there, but it sometimes wasn't the first priority. Whereas for us, we are a faith-based organisation. We start with our scripture programmes. That's our most important programme resource that we provide. And we have a team of ministers and a team of children's workers and youth workers who write all of that. And that's such a blessing for them, for us to have them write that. But for us, we kind of start with God and we move on out from there. We talk to our ministers. We're very involved trying to get ministers together to help us, and also how can we help you in your ministry. We see Boys Brigade as a huge ministry opportunity, and when we talk to our leaders, there are some companies where there's as much as 80% of the boys who come to BB have no other church connection.
That's what I was just about to ask you. You don't have to be a church family, you don't have to be churchy or have a faith to come to BB.
No. BB opens its doors. We don't stand at the door with a checklist and go, are you this, are you that? No, if you're a boy and you're the right age, come on and join us. And, we won't hide behind the fact that, yes, they will hear about Jesus. They will hear about a saviour. They will hear Bible stories. But they also will see in the leaders that modelling of, leaders trying to be effective followers of Christ and wanting to be a friend to these boys, to offer them an opportunity to develop relationships and have somewhere to go and be themselves and experience new things.
Who appoints those leaders? Do you vet them?
No, we go through a safeguarding process, absolutely, we do. But the leaders are appointed by the church. So if you consider Boys Brigade across Northern Ireland, we're in Presbyterian, Church of Ireland, Methodist, Elim, Baptist, Church of God, Congregational. I've probably missed a few, but we have BB companies in so many different churches. And so we don't have a position on certain things about leadership. So we can't dictate what makes a leader. So the church appoints the leader. So in some churches, they will say a leader must be a communicant member. In other churches, they will say a leader must be baptised. And it really kind of falls in line with any other leadership within their church, whether they're leading a girls' brigade or a youth fellowship. So the church appoints the leaders. And you, if you want to be a leader, you talk to the BB captain, you talk to the church, you will go through the church scheme of appointing, which usually is an interview, an informal interview. Then the Access NI is done either by them or by us.
Has to be, yes.
Has to be. And until that process is done and they are registered with us, they cannot be active in the BB company. But it's the church that knows the leaders. It's the church that can, get those people from within their congregation. So the church appoints, and that means that leadership comes in different shapes and sizes in different churches, and that's their responsibility to decide what essentially they want from a leader. And then we will have things like, training and all the safeguarding side of it and coming to things like that. So we will help equip them for BB leadership. But we want to partner with the church. We want the church to help equip them for Christian leadership as well. And a lot of what we've done to change some of the things over the past 2 years, because we're able to now do it. So our BB leader training focuses on faith as well as leading in BB running programmes, but focuses on how do you talk to children about faith. How do you share the gospel with them? But then also as leaders, we're talking about, well, how do we help leaders? How can we equip them? How can we provide them with devotional material and stuff that helps them on their leadership journey? Because it's about Christian leadership in BB.
It sounds like a setup with a society that's changing and all sorts of issues, particularly around people, young people, coming to the fore. You're not prescriptive. You can't be. You can't decide who comes, who doesn't come, who's allowed to be a member, who isn't. No. The local churches look after that for themselves with your help and guidance. Is that
it
fair?
Has to be. You know, there's 2,700 volunteers. So, you know, I play a role in safeguarding. You know, I play a role in Access NI and in you know, looking at applications coming through and processing them with Access NI. But at that point, they're names to us. How could we judge whether someone is suitable to be a leader? We have to rely on the church to have their mechanisms in place to appoint their leaders. And if a church recommend someone for leadership, as long as there are no big red flags that come through on the Access NI, we support that. We're literally registering them with the church's endorsement, and we ask for the church's endorsement on that, so they won't come through our leadership scheme unless it has been signed off by the church leadership, a minister, the clerk of session, or someone in the leadership team in the church.
You're listening to the Commission Files. Time for a quick break.
There was once a time here when Bible copies were scarce. One person thought this wasn't right.
Brother Colm, you're making a copy.
Well, I need to make notes.
But you're making a copy of the sacred word. I cannot allow that.
Why not?
His name was Colmcille, later known as St Columba. His dispute went to the High King of Ireland.
To every cow her calf, and to every book her copy. The copy belongs to Finian. Colm, you've no rights to it.
I cannot accept that, Your Majesty.
Accept it or not, you must obey my ruling.
A battle ensued. Many people were killed, and Colm had to atone for what he had done. You must leave Ireland, for good. You must settle somewhere where Ireland cannot be seen.
Exile, to leave the place I love?
Yes, you must. He sailed away to the north, towards the Hebridean Islands, and so began a far-reaching vision of the Word of God. Commission presents Breach of Copyright by Colin Flanagan.
This is the Commission Files with Will Leach, and I'm chatting with Lisa Keys from Boys Brigade, Northern Ireland. How big a job is Chief Officer? I get the sense you're incredibly busy and I'm lucky I got you for an hour or two.
It is much bigger than I ever anticipated. Well, I'll be honest with you.
You don't look that tired. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose the challenge for me is I am somebody who doesn't really switch off. I'm always constantly thinking, what's next? So some of it is my own doing. It's an all-encompassing job. I think sometimes people think, oh, you know, you're chief officer of the Boys Brigade and that's, you know, dealing with boys and, you know, running programmes for boys. You know, there's no kids in our office. You know, I'm not standing.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah. Maybe a few times we act like kids, but that's good too. You know, I'm there to manage the day-to-day operations of a charity. Now, I came to the organisation with a level of commercial skills. You know, I didn't come from the charity sector, but I had worked in organisations that looked at strategic planning, at good governance. I mean, I worked for Institute of Directors for 3 years, and that's all about good governance. And that was really where I learned so much about governance that has stood me in good stead for this role. My days are so different. You know, I could be spending, you know, time with the Department of Education or the Education Authority looking at policy. You know, I'm involved in the policy review that they're working on at the minute, as are numerous colleagues in the sector. I could be, you know, going to a training on good governance in the role of the company secretary, dealing with the auditors, looking at charity commission, trying to manage the team, encouraging people to be empowered to, you know, use their skills creatively to develop programmes, to engage with people. And then there's just some of the day-to-day planning in terms of, how are we going to, serve out that vision of raising generations of Christ-like men. I work closely with the trustees. I'm company secretary, and that's a huge task as well. And then just keeping your hand in and going to things and being with volunteers. It's so important that all of our staff are connecting them with volunteers. They're fabulous people, apart from anything. It's good crack going and meeting, but hearing from them and trying to make sure that we remain relevant. If we didn't work with the volunteers, we could not produce what we do. We have groupings of volunteers who work on particular streams and projects that produce things that help the leaders. And so my role every day is so, so different. And one of the huge tasks that we have ahead that we're looking at, which is part of the reason why I jumped at the chance of coming to this, is promoting Boys Brigade. We've spent the last 2 years getting the foundations of an independent organisation made. We had to move very quickly in the formation of the organisation.
Yes, it sounds like it.
Yeah, we've very little time. We signed the agreement with BB UK in July and we exited on the 31st of August. Now, we were planning behind the scenes, but, even up until then, we didn't know whether, it would definitely go through. And now we have time to kind of pause and plan. We have a strategic plan in place. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to doing actually is the whole communications piece and raising the profile and looking at new BB companies. We would love to open new companies. Sadly, there are churches which the demographic has changed. There's no longer boys in the area. They're struggling to get leaders. So we will lose a few companies, and we do every year. But there are other pockets where there's just, such appetite to grow, and we need to be doing that. But we need to educate people. What is BB? How can it help the mission of your church? But also, why should boys come? We're the second largest uniformed organisation in Northern Ireland. The first largest one, or the largest one, is Girls Brigade. And isn't that wonderful that they're the Christian organisations? Now, we work with...
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
we work with our
fascinating.
colleagues in, Scouts, Guides, Catholic Guides, Scouting Ireland, whatever. We all work together because it's useful for us all to know what everyone else is doing and also to advocate for the children and young people. Uniformed organisations are huge in Northern Ireland. Huge in terms of numbers. It's about 45,000 young people come to uniformed organisations and about 15,000 leaders, volunteer leaders across the 6 organisations. That's a significant bulk of youth work. And we advocate for that as a collective, as 6 uniformed organisations. We advocate for the role of uniformed in making a difference in the lives of children and young people. And for us, that difference that we make in BB has a spiritual side. And that's what makes it so rewarding.
You used a phrase a couple of times, raising generations of Christ-like men. And I like that. And you're working with children, boys, young men, more experienced adult men in the 2020s. And you're thinking about things, and it's all over your website, courage and integrity and responsibility and respect. And there will be part of your job is thinking, because it's there, how do we counter the negatives that are associated with 2025's masculinity? Some people call it toxic masculinity. There are influences out there that we don't want on our young people.
Yeah.
And you, I'm sure, are very aware of them.
Very aware of it. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago run by University of Ulster, Taking Boys Seriously. And actually the speaker, who does a lot of work with boys and young men, said that he asks the question, what do you think of when you hear the word masculinity? And most of the boys say toxic. And that is horrendous. That is an awful position for boys to be in, that's what they think it is. And listening to some of the stuff in the conference, you're listening to what they're saying needs to change. And you're thinking, but Jesus is how that changes. Introducing these boys to Jesus is how that's going to change. And we're looking very much at how we can help boys to navigate. So we've done some stuff with boys on mental health. We work with Made for More, a mental health Christian charity, and working on them. How can they talk about what's going on? How can they be themselves? We're looking at how we address the whole violence against women and girls by shaping and helping to show boys that there are other ways to do things. And through the whole of our programmes, it is about those behaviours, those godly behaviours, and role modelling that to the boys. We were never their age. You know, the culture they have at the minute is not the same. And you know, they're seeing role models on their phones every day that are not the type of role models that we want. But the other role models are there. They're just not as visibly seen. And that's something that we are really challenged by in BB. That's something that all the leaders are striving every week when they're engaging with these boys, is to be someone that they can talk to, is to develop those relationships. And that's nothing new. We know that that works. We hear stories of people standing in the chippy and someone comes in and goes, "Do you remember me? I was in your BB. And you know, it was only whenever I hit a crossroads in my life I remembered something I heard in BB and that saved me." And there's so many messages of that. So we're just trying to build on that. We're trying to make sure that what we do is relevant and that we're engaging with boys in a way that they can respond, and offering them the opportunity to have that safe space and those relationships to talk to people about real live issues. We're having to tackle some issues which... We're in a Christian organisation that's run in churches. Sometimes there's this thing, well, we'll not talk about it in that church context, and then it doesn't happen. You know, we have to deal with some of those issues. We have to look at what those issues are that are facing boys and young men. And we do a bit of research every year. We ask leaders, we ask boys. We're doing a big piece of work in this next year about engaging with the boys to find out what is going on in their world and how can we help them with that. And that's a real blessing and a privilege to do that, but there's a huge responsibility to do that well. And so that's a team effort. And it's just all about conversations and engaging and being open to new things and new ways of helping them navigate. And the Bible is the best set of standards that they're ever going to have. So it's about making sure that they're hearing that message and being given the opportunity to respond to that.
And it has to be said, occasionally being hard-nosed and saying, this behaviour we don't accept, that we don't allow, because we know the damage it does to everybody and will inevitably do to you. And that means taking a stand sometimes and putting your foot down as an organisation and saying, this isn't on. Yeah.
I mean, part of the object of BB talks about discipline, and that is about standards. You know, if you're going into a BB company and everybody's running riot and nobody hears anything and there's no discipline, nobody's going to get anything out of it. But we're not talking about discipline which is so outdated and archaic. It's about standards of discipline which people take a pride in. You know, you talked earlier about marching. That's why some of the companies love to do that, because the boys never get a chance to do something like that, which is skill and it's discipline and it's teaching them something. So it's about taking all those things and adopting them in ways that are relevant to the young people of today. And young people are coming. You know, we've just over 11,000 boys that are coming. They're not coming under duress. Yes, the younger ones, their parents leave them off. But, you know, we know companies are like, is it BB night tonight? Is it BB time? You know, they're so disappointed, the younger ones, when it's not BB night. And while the boys are still coming, we'll still run programmes and encourage that, and we want to see it growing. It's kind of stabilised coming out of COVID, and we think that there's potential now to grow it, and that's fabulous.
You referred back to all the different things you'd done. You didn't want to be a teacher.
No.
When you were at school. What else didn't you want to be? An accountant, was that?
Yeah. So now when I was a child, I wanted to be a teacher. You know, I lined up my teddies, I played schools, I sent my brother as headmaster into the other room, you know, and then never bothered, you know, contacting the headmaster. I didn't. And then my sister decided she wanted to be a teacher, and I just thought, I don't think I could teach. And I was right, she can, I can't. I was always very good at maths, and so, try accountancy. No, I decided that really wasn't for me either. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do at all. And I was told, go and do your best subject at Queen's. That was a bit of a mistake. So I struggled through a maths degree, because at the time it was my best subject, but really by second and third year it wasn't my best subject at all. But, you know, you get through.
So you went into business. Doing what kind of stuff?
Marketing. So I went into business. I did a placement and loved marketing. Thought I wanted to do HR, and then a friend said, no, HR is not about people. You'd be far better at marketing.
That's so true.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I'm not an HR person. And, Yeah, I went into marketing and started off in Tile Market whenever Tile Market had 25 stores and that catchy wee jingle, which was nothing to do with me, but we played it so many times. And that was brilliant. Such a good grounding. Family run business, and oh my goodness, what that teaches you about managing budgets was fantastic. And then I moved from there into Castlecourt, and I was marketing manager in Castlecourt. And do you know, it's so funny. They apparently have this big board at the minute celebrating their 30th birthday. And a colleague of mine looked at it at the weekend and sent me a little picture where my picture is on that board. And I was showing it to my...
just the same.
No, jeepers, thankfully not. I was showing it to my husband and he said, "You loved that job." And I was like, "Yeah, I absolutely did." Westfield owned Castlecourt at the time, and that was a real lesson in all kinds of management, everything, but just, running fashion shows and Santa parades and dealing with retailers.
If you think about that from its beginnings, where they were building it for years, it was bombed so many times.
That's right.
On my lunch break, I used to walk around and see what had happened this time.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, Victoria Square wasn't there at the time. So when I was there, it was the premier shopping destination, and it was fantastic. And I still have friends that, you know, I worked with, and I loved it. It was brilliant. Yeah. I've had quite a varied career, Will.
You clearly liked what you learned at the Institute of Directors, because that's a different level. That's strategic. That's leadership. And did you enjoy slotting into that different way of doing things?
Loved it. When I left Pin St Masons, a colleague said to me, "You're going to really love talking to businesses and finding out what people do." And I never realised so much happened in Northern Ireland. You know, I remember going to see someone who made these, like the bedding that goes into prisons, and how they can't have any loose ends, and, you know, to protect the people that are there. And I'm thinking, this happens in Northern Ireland. You know, it's the scale of what can be achieved in Northern Ireland, and the business people, the people that I met, I still bump into them now. There's people that I phone up and go, "I need a wee hand, how do you do this?" You know, it's that network. And IOD really taught me about networking and the power of your network, about governance, about strategy, just about how to professionalise what you're doing. And so many lessons. I mean, I have been really blessed in the roles that I have done. They have prepared me particularly for this role. And I can see that whenever I look back. I can see God's hand in all those different ways. Even some of the experiences that were challenging and shouldn't really have been challenging, just, you know, God was teaching me that whole time, and I've been able to draw on it in this role that I'm in, because the role that I'm in now is not the role that I applied for. You know, I was not applying to be the chief officer of an independent charity. I was applying to be a regional director of a bigger organisation. And that has been a huge learning curve. But I've been able to draw on what I've learnt in different roles and the people that I've met along the way.
But there's more of a buck stops with you now.
Oh, huge, huge. Buck stops with me and the trustees. So not totally with me, but a lot of it does. And, you know, you have to make decisions, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, and you have to flex that afterwards, and that's okay. But you've got to make decisions and you've got to keep moving on.
Where do you learn most? When it's all going well, when it's been a success and you think that works, or when you're challenged, or when there's dissent or a downturn or division? When do you learn most?
When there's challenge, because you can't just do what you want to do. I mean, David told me whenever I was coming in, you know, it's a big ship and it turns quite slowly. Now, we joke that, you know, in the years we were working together, it turned quite quickly. But you do have to bring people on that journey with you. And there are times whenever God is really shouting at me, "Be patient, pause." I'm not a patient person at all, never have been. And I've had to learn that. And there are times whenever I just think, no, we've just got to pause here, because you're listening to people. People are not with you. And you have to then consider, if we do this now, is it going to be the best way that we can do it? And sometimes you've got to go, no, we're just going to have to leave it. So I think in the challenges, that is where certainly I've learned the most. That's where I felt God directing the most. You know, I haven't done this. This is not me. You know, 5 years ago, I couldn't have dreamt that I would be sitting here. This is God. and I have a wee verse on my wall on the whiteboard beside me. And it's from Psalms, and I've set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. And that's not, I will do whatever I want and God will not let it shake me. No, if I set God in front of me and give it to him, he will make sure that I'm not shaken.
There's just a little question here on my notes that I'm scoring out, which is, what's your faith journey? Because you've started to tell me, which is brilliant. Take me back to the beginning, to your earliest memories of understanding issues of faith, understanding who God is, who Jesus is, who the Spirit is.
So we lived in Beaver. We grew up in Beaver, and we were very close, within walking distance, to all the churches. And we went to everything going. And I was a real joiner. So, Monday night was brownies, and Tuesday night was the Tuesday meeting. Friday night was CE, Christian Endeavour. And I remember probably most vividly what I learned through it. And one night I came home from CA 4 or 5. I'm not quite sure, I don't have a definitive date, but I remember knowing that I needed Jesus. And that's whenever I became a Christian. And being a Christian in primary school was easy. There were lots of Christians in the class. And, I was a wee bit of a do-gooder. Didn't push too many boundaries. Then grammar school, again, I went to a school that had quite a lot of Christians. It was easy enough. Now, I wouldn't say I was the best example of following Jesus. Definitely not in some things. I didn't do anything really, really, really wrong, but there were a lot of things I didn't do that were terribly right. And then whenever I got to uni, that's whenever I struggled a bit. Went to Queen's, lived at home, actually slept on my friend's floor every Thursday night. We went to see you, and then we went to the Scandia and ate cheesecake. So again, it wasn't really
a well-trodden path.
Yeah, a really well-trodden path. But just at that point, then, when you start working and you start to try and work out how you are a Christian in the workplace, that's when it becomes really, really difficult. And funny, I was just sharing at the weekend with a wee group of, I do this breakfast Bible club, and we had this sleepover for our P6s and P7s, and we were all sharing round the campfire about our faith journey. And what I was saying to the boys and girls was, it's not about your conversion story, that moment whenever God takes you, because some people will have a really big bang moment, and that's very powerful. But everyone has a story that God has given them. And mine is more how God has used me, particularly over probably these last 20 years, and how he has shaped my faith and changed me to become more like what I should be. I'm still not there yet. Thankfully, I'm a work in progress. And I thank God for that every day. Whenever I mess up, and there's still it's the same things that kind of catch me out. But my story is no less valid. It's how God has used me and is continuing to use me, and that's my faith journey. And I suppose because I now work in the Boys Brigade, there is an expectation. People know, well, she's bound to be a Christian if she works there. So that is easier to a certain degree in terms of sharing your faith. But I made a very conscious decision whenever I went into BB that I wouldn't isolate myself, because I could become in a Christian bubble. And I keep saying to the staff, you've got to get beyond the faith. Don't just go for meetings with leaders and ministers and other Christian organisations, albeit there's a great deal of support in those Christian organisations and brilliant, brilliant people. But you've got to keep a foot in the world. Otherwise, you have no testimony for anybody.
You're part of a community, and you're part of a society. And
totally.
Exactly.
Totally. And that's why I love to get involved in other things. I'm involved with CO3 in terms of, the charity sector. I'm involved with the Charity Commission Stakeholder Forum. I love to be involved in other things. And whilst you're not going into those meetings and going, hey, let me tell you about Jesus, but through your behaviours and how you approach and how you deal with things, how we deal with our suppliers, we will pay them promptly. We will pay them early if we can. We try to make sure that we are showing a Christian witness to everyone that we come in contact with. And sometimes sometimes it's overtly, and sometimes it's just in how you operate and how you work.
One final thought. You said you're doing a job now that you didn't necessarily expect to do whenever you did the job interview and got appointed and said, well, hey, I've got it, great. And now you're doing something different. Everything about the way you've described it to me suggests that you are just having the best time.
Sometimes. Sometimes it's not easy. Well, leadership is not easy, and anyone in leadership will know that. I think it comes down to attitudes. You know, I had to make a conscious decision that I would have battle bruises and not battle scars, you know, because bruises heal, scars don't really. And sometimes that's easier and other times it's not. I have a great team, really committed people who want to do the very best that they can. I've made sure to have people around me to help me on that journey. I have an extremely supportive family who sometimes, BB again, here she goes. I can see the good in what we're doing, and I can see that God has placed me here. And while God has placed me here, I will do as much as I possibly can. And I know then that when the time comes when I'm not right for the organisation anymore, that God will move me on because God put me here. I know that so clearly. And so I take strength in that. There are some days that is not easy. It really isn't. And there are some days when people get little messages from me just going, I need you to pray. And I know those people will pray and they don't even need to know what it is. And it is only through God's grace that I sit here in the position that I'm in. But I have enjoyed it so far, mostly. And it has given me some really great opportunities. And I've met some absolutely tremendous people, not least so many of the leaders who are just so committed to what they do and so committed to wanting boys to hear about Jesus.
When we started our conversation, I suggested that you were a busy person. That's quite clearly the case. So we're so grateful that you've taken the time to explain what you do and what motivates you. Thank you so much, Lisa.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And telling it to us. And thanks to all of you for your company in the Commission Files. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing as you've been listening, thanks for clicking that play button. You're welcome to give us a review if you think our episodes are a good listen. 5 stars are always welcome. We have had fewer. You can also text us your thoughts from whichever podcast app you're using. And if you're curious about Commission, there's our website, commissionradio.org. You'll find links to our YouTube channel, Instagram and Facebook pages. And we'll be back soon. Bye.